me and my husband might both be even authoritative or authoritarian, whatever you want, but we still have different styles. What did you mean by that? What did you mean by that? The different styles with it, meaning, because that wasn't really within these categories that we're talking about.
Right. So even within a certain style, meaning my husband and I both agree with the authoritative model. Okay. We both, our values align with that. We have the same perspective. But when it comes down to, everyday moments, sometimes we might disagree about what is best for our children or how to navigate something.
Okay, welcome back to another week of the Jews Next Door. For those of you who heard our special guest episode with Blimie Heller, you know that you are in store for an incredible episode again. And for those of you who didn't, first of all, I would strongly recommend listening to that episode. It was really earth-shattering. It really opened up my mind to so many different things of parenting that you have to listen to, number one. And number two, Blimie is amazing. And thank you so much, Blimie, again, for taking the time. It was one of the leaders of our door in the parenting realm, and to taking the time to talk about the Jews Next Door, raising the Jews Next Door. So thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to have you back.
Thank you so much for having me with that introduction. Like I just told you before, I don't remember what I said the first time. So if I repeat myself, I apologize in advance, but hopefully there will be new insights that I'm sharing here as well.
I have zero doubt whatsoever. So first things first, we're talking about parenting styles. So for those who don't know what parenting styles are, or the different parenting styles, what would you say? How can you lay that out for us? What are the different parenting styles?
Yeah. So there was actually I believe she was a psychologist. I may be wrong, maybe a psychiatrist. Yeah, she was a doctor, actually. Dr. Diana Baumrind. I think that's how you pronounce her name. Not sure. She was actually the one who coined these parenting styles that many of us are familiar with. She put it into 4 different categories. One was what she called authoritarian parenting. Another one was permissive. Or she called it something else, actually. I don't remember now. Another one was authoritative. And then the other one was neglectful, I believe. And so she's the one who came up with these styles and then did studies to see which ones had the best outcomes with children. Yes. So,
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those are really primarily, when people talk about parenting styles, that's usually what we refer to as those styles.
Got it. And based on your extensive experience, do you think that it's that black and white? Are there 4? Or would you say that you've seen that there's maybe a 5th or more than that? Have you seen anything different?
I love that question. Actually, there's 2 things here. Is that first of all, nobody is all of one. Meaning sometimes some of us are permissive, sometimes we're authoritarian. Like every parent, I think, now again, we all have maybe one style that we lean towards more often, but I think every single one of us at some point inhabit one of those 4 styles. Sometimes a mistake, or because we're human, and sometimes actually intentionally. Because we believe right now, actually, I should just let this go. And we are permissive, quote unquote. So it's interesting because I think that sometimes somebody might read like, oh, this is permissive parenting. And they'll think I do that sometimes, but it's really about the overall picture, what you're doing. Also, another point. So most people just vacillate between the styles. Nobody's like all of, only one. And then also, interestingly enough, when I came across her research, I was thinking the way that I talk about parenting doesn't really fit into any of these styles. The one that it mostly fits into is authoritative, but still some of it wasn't entirely, what I talk about. And then I delved deeper into her research, and most people don't know this. She actually found a 5th parenting style, which it was such a small number of parents that did this parenting style that she just didn't know what to do with it and didn't put it into the actual she did some.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, and she called them harmony parents or harmonious parents because she said that.
What does that mean?
Yeah, she said that they prioritize harmony. So working together with their children, and she said they actually had really good outcomes as well, which is really, really fascinating. She says, because with the other styles, with authoritarian, permissive, it's all based on seen through the lens of control. So every single one, if you notice, it's control versus support. So with authoritarian parenting, there's a high level of control, a low level of support. With permissive parenting, there's a high level of support, a low level of control. With authoritarian, a high level of support and a high level of control. And neglectful is both, no support, no control. So yes. Now, in harmonious parents, she saw there wasn't really control. The parents weren't really looking to control their children. They were more looking to work together with their children, to have harmony in the relationship. And that was their goal. That was their idea. And really, that's, for me, I think I'm drawn to that way of parenting the most. Of course, I believe we need to have boundaries, but I don't believe that control. Now, again, boundaries could sort of step into the area of control somewhat when we have children, but I don't really like to think of it in terms of control. So that really sits much better with me.
Got it. Wow. Okay. There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
I want to unpack a lot of the things you just said.
Yeah.
So let's go. You said this more so in the beginning of what you just said. You said that some people tend to lean towards maybe one. Where does that come from? Like, why would someone lean towards being an authoritarian versus an authoritative or whatever it is? Like, where would that come from?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a combination of two things that are everything we do in life, I think, come from these two places. So it's nature and nurture. I think that some people, we naturally lean more towards being supportive and some of us lean more towards boundaries and control. And then also the way our parents raised us has a big impact. So even if a child, let's say, was raised in a home where there was authoritarian parenting, meaning there was a high level of control, low level of support, and the child really yearned for more support and hated that like high degree of control, they may flip and be like, I don't want to do that with my children. And so they're going to become permissive.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And do the opposite. So it's really, and some people will be exactly the way their parents were. So it's really, it's a combination of both. And really how it manifests in each person is so different, you know?
Wow. That is fascinating. Really interesting. And also another thing you were just saying was that, you know, the harmonious concept where kind of like wanting to like work together with your children. That sounds like a lot of parents nowadays, where I feel like a lot of parents nowadays are really trying to, I don't know, I guess just like be friends with their children in certain ways, which, you know, it's just an interesting phenomenon. I'm curious, like, would you say that fits into that category, or is that like it's its own thing, or it's not really within that?
Yeah. Like, okay. So
because I know add the caveat. I know authoritarian is like developing that strong relationship. So obviously there is that strong, but I feel like harmonious is like a little less of just like the boundaries and like, you know, where those boundaries maybe sometimes get blurred. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah. So this is a really, really good question, and something that is a very touchy topic for a lot of people, because especially nowadays, you'll hear a lot of older people saying like, nowadays people are friends with their children, like in a derogatory way, you know, kind of saying
Yes.
like, which kind of, when I hear that, I hear sort of like they believe that parents nowadays are permissive, meaning there's no boundaries. There's like a high level of support, or maybe even more than permissive. It's that maybe you even want your children to like you. And so you're not going to do what you need to do, upset your children, because sometimes you will upset your children, even though that's not your motivation. It's not your motivation, but sometimes that's a byproduct of setting a boundary. And so you end up being, you know, so I think that's what they're saying when they say, oh, you're friends with your children. Now, I am of the belief that we absolutely should. I mean, I don't really like the word should, but we can be our children's friends. I love the idea. I mean, like, and again, when I say, I think it goes this way. Our children, we should be our children's friends, meaning our children can feel like they can confide in us, that we understand them, that we know them, and have a good time with us. And we can also be our children's friends, but the other way is with a little bit more boundaries, meaning I'm not confiding in my children about my own struggles, right?
Sure.
Right? Of course, unless I believe it will benefit them. Meaning if I share about, you know, I used to struggle with this, and my child would be like, oh, you understand me, or, oh, you were able to get through that. So in that way I will, but not because I actually am leaning on them for support. So, but I think it's wonderful. I believe parents should be their children's friends. However, I don't believe that negates being a parent. I believe we can be a friend and a parent. You know, I believe like so much of the way I was raised was very black and white. It was either or. Either you're their friend or you're their parent. Why can't it be both?
So how would it be both?
Yeah. So that's really everything that I teach, and it encompasses so much. But just to give you a very, very brief, small example, if let's say my child wants to have, I always struggle with examples. Okay, let's say they want to ride their bike without a helmet. Okay, Now,
Sure.
so if I really prioritize being a friend, if I prioritize it maybe to the point that I'm like, okay, a friend would say like, who cares? Ride it without the helmet, right? Maybe a friend would say that, but I'm their parent. And so it's my job to keep them safe. And so I won't say, oh yeah, sure, go ahead and ride it without the helmet. I'll say, riding with the helmet is necessary. And so I can't let you ride the bike unless you wear the helmet. There, I'm setting the boundary. Now, where am I going back to being a friend though in that moment is that I'm really going to understand my child though and where they're coming from. And I'm going to try to work with them as much as possible. So I'll do two things. First, I'll offer empathy. Oh, I know it sucks to wear the helmet. You really hate it. You don't enjoy it. It's hot. It's uncomfortable. I get it. I really get it. So I can hold the boundary and understand them at the same time, both. Right. But holding a boundary doesn't mean I have to say like, too bad. You have to wear the helmet and walk off. Right.
That would be more like authoritative.
Authoritarian probably is more
authoritarian.
Yeah.
Okay.
Authoritative really is very similar to harmonious parents. I just prefer the harmonious title. And for, like I said, because like the control, hers was very much about control. And I don't really like that so much, but really authoritative is nowadays it's very interchangeable. People use that to describe the way that I advocate, the type of style that I advocate for.
Which one? Authoritarian?
Authoritative is.
Oh, I thought okay.
Yeah.
I thought authoritative was the one that was like intense.
Oh, like I'm the boss and you don't have a say and that's it. Yeah. No, that's authoritarian. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah. So, so that would be like, too bad, and then also I can say like, how can I help you? What can we do to make it easier for you? Like, is it that just this helmet is maybe there are other styles that are more comfortable. Maybe there's, I'm really willing to, help my child and work with them and also have a lot of empathy. So in that way, I'm their friend, but I'm still their parent where I'm setting the boundaries and holding them when necessary.
Sure. Got it. Okay. So that's meaning you have to be able to stay within being a parenting role model, but being able to still empathize and hear them in a friendly way, in a way that a friend really cares deeply.
Exactly. Just like a friend cares and wants to work with you and he listens to you, same thing. We don't have to choose one or the other. We can be that supportive friend, so to speak, really parents. And ideally, really, that's what a parent should be. But for some reason, we associate parent with just like the boss and being in control. But absolutely, we want to provide those boundaries.
For sure. So I'm curious, we spoke briefly, we touched on this a little bit before about what influences our parenting style. So number one, just in general, what influences, but more specifically, what does anything in Judaism, like in our Avodas Hashem, does that from the Torah, from anything from there come and influence the way our parenting styles come out?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I wonder about this all the time. I have a friend who's a historian and I always ask her, can you tell me what was the parenting style like in the times of the Beis HaMikdash? Or what was it like in the Roman times?
It's fascinating.
Yeah, because I really believe that, and maybe people won't like to hear this, but I really believe that it's influenced by the dominant culture more than anything else. I don't believe, because Judaism, this is the thing, Judaism speaks on halacha and mitzvos and what our obligations are, but it doesn't speak on how to have a good marriage or what kind of marriage we should have, right? Of course, there are certain halachos within marriage and there's some sort of, you'll hear some inspiration and insight about what kind of bond there should be, etc. But about the practical ways to get there or to do that, we don't have that. And it's the same with parenting. There's a lot of room to sort of be the kind of parent that you feel is best, or that, right? Within the Jewish structure, within what we're told. So I don't think there's a Jewish way of parenting. There are definitely things that are against Judaism, like Onas Devarim, right? Hurting another person's feelings, hurting someone with words is against the Torah, and it applies to children too. So that would be against the Torah. There's also, is it in Mishlei? Where it says spare Chanoch Lanar Pidarko, and then there's also spare the rod, hate the child, right? Choshech, Shifto, Sone Beno, or something like that. Yeah. So there's all those things that sort of, it's what does that even mean? Is it literal? How do we interpret that? And we can take inspiration from that. But I really believe most of it is really inspired, or maybe inspired is not a great word, by the dominant culture around us. If you'll notice, a lot of the way that we were raised and parented, a lot of our generation, mine, I'm assuming you're more or less in the same category. Most of it was really influenced. So that's the word, not inspired, influenced by behaviorism. And behaviorism was really like, the science of the West, and what was very much like Pavlov and his dogs. And it's about the training of animals. And that really is what influenced a lot of the way that our parents raised us, because that's what was around,
Right. And the shift now is that there's a major shift now. So where is that coming from? That's not based on behaviorism.
Right. And that's coming from attachment theory. So what happened is, so there's behaviorism, the science, then moved towards attachment. A lot of different doctors and psychologists started, I think John Bowlby, I don't know how to pronounce his name either, but I read all of these and I never hear them. So he's the one who came up with attachment theory. And I think and they started understanding neuroscience a lot more. So they started seeing like brain scans of children and how their brains develop. And this influenced a lot of the way that we parent as well, because people realize like, oh my goodness, children actually don't have impulse control. Why are we punishing them for that? And with attachment, they started understanding like children really need that bond with that parent, and anything that undermines that is really not good for the relationship. And like, for example, we were given timeouts a lot. Let's say like timeouts was the thing. It still is, unfortunately.
Sure. Right.
But what attachment, researchers discovered is that it's actually really terrible for the attachment with parent and child. And it really creates all these kinds of side effects that we don't want in our children. And so they realize like, that's actually not a great strategy. Let's skip that. It's a very much a behaviorist strategy, but it's neuroscience and attachment doesn't really see the benefit. If anything, it's quite harmful. So so I believe that that's really what's influenced by it. Now, I personally, Judaism always prioritized children and treating children well. I don't know, like in the olden days, I think there was a lot of children were sacrificed sometimes, right? Children were not really seen as like precious and important, but Judaism always had this idea that like the children are our future, and then like we teach the children and so there was always a big emphasis on treating our children well, on making them a priority. And I believe that has never changed for us. And so for me personally, I believe like these ideas that I'm hearing are so much, for me, they feel very in line with Judaism, because it really,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it really just prioritizes our children as people.
That's amazing. I love it. Okay. So we went through what the four of them are. What are, or if you want to say the fifth as well, what would you say are the pros and cons of each of these different styles?
Yeah. So,
or if any, would you say there are?
Yeah. Well, obviously there's probably so many, but we'll speak about the most obvious. So the authoritarian, where there's a high level of control, low level of support, it really ends up, of course, you can imagine the damages the relationship between parent and child. So the child does not at all feel cared for, understood by the parents. They feel very alone, which can create mental health issues down the line, because their emotions they're left alone with their emotions a lot of the time. There's also a lot of resentment that they feel. There's also sometimes they rebel because they feel like they always have to submit. A lot of them submit and lose themselves, so they end up becoming adults who don't really know who they are, or they're just rule followers who have no clue what they like or what they don't like, or who they are, what's important to them. All these kinds of mutations. It doesn't sound wonderful, right?
No.
Then with the permissive approach, which a lot of times children who are raised with an authoritarian approach, like I said, they might flip to treating their children in a permissive way because they remember how painful it was to have that level of control and not having that level of support. So they might, give them so much support, but not enough control, or which I would interpret that as not enough boundaries. And so those children, what they actually find is that sometimes they end up becoming a little bit like narcissistic in the way that they think the world revolves around them, because they haven't had like somebody say like, actually, this is uncomfortable, or I don't like this. It's always, they've just been given whatever and never told like, this is not okay, this is a problem. Also sometimes like reckless behavior as teenagers and things like that, trouble taking responsibility for themselves. So things like that are usually on that side. And then with the neglectful, which is like low level of support and low level of control, that's probably what we would consider like borderline, like abusive. I mean, it's right. I mean, abuse and neglect goes together really. It's the child wasn't given none of their needs were really met, you know, if you think about authoritarian parenting, some of the children's needs are met in authoritarian parenting and some are not, right? Their emotional needs are not met, but their physical needs are probably met, and their needs of like safety and, you know, the parent is setting those boundaries. So those are being met. In permissive parenting, some needs are being met, like the ones for emotional connection and support are being met, but some are not being met, like the ones for safety and for, you know, whatever it is, the needs that are met when parent sets a boundary. Now with neglectful parenting, no needs are met.
Right. You don't got any.
Yeah. It's like nothing is. So you can imagine it's like children end up being really suffering in those circumstances. Right. Yeah. In so many ways. Everything that I mentioned for both of them can happen with these, but it's really like they really struggle. Obviously, there's always exceptions with every single style. Like outcomes are not really in our hands. So it's more a predictor, like what usually happens. But of course, there's always exceptions. There are children who come from those environments that end up being amazing. So, and then the authoritative, where it's a high level of support and a high level of control, which I would interpret as having boundaries, then the child all of their needs are met. So you can imagine in that those usually the children are responsible. They're usually cordial. They understand how to navigate the world. They have a good relationship with their parents. Their emotional health is usually, good. They're doing well, etc. So now again, I say all their needs are met. Every parent is human. No parent can meet their child's needs 100% of the time, all the time. I mean, that wouldn't even be possible even if they tried. And so we're talking about all their needs are met in a more or less consistent way overall. Of course, with lapses, we all sometimes don't meet our children's needs.
For sure.
Yeah.
So how can a parent, I guess, self-identify and figure out which one am I? Meaning, obviously, in a way, it's like, okay, do you fit into any of these categories? But is there a litmus test? What would you recommend for a parent to like kind of be more self-aware about these parenting styles?
Yeah. So I think it would be as simple as this. There's a few questions to ask yourself. First of all, do you set boundaries when necessary? Now, this is a little bit of a trick.
Can you define boundaries just because for anyone who's not clear, like what you mean by boundaries? Because I know that your definition of boundaries is you're not nuanced, but like you have a specific idea on it.
Right. Because boundaries can become control. Boundaries is basically a line. Well, it's a limit, and a boundary is pretty similar. The boundary is what I'll communicate. The limit is the actual limit. So it's when there are certain limits, because if you move beyond that, it's going to hurt yourself or another person. Like if you don't wear a helmet, you may get fall and hurt yourself. If you hit another person, they may get hurt. If you don't go to sleep now, you will become sick, whatever it is. Right. So if there's something, there will be somebody else's needs will be infringed upon. Somebody else will experience, will have a negative impact on them, or it will be a negative impact on the child themselves, or on the environment, like if they're, destroying everything around them, then I will set a boundary. Then a parent will set a boundary and say, I cannot let you do this, or you need to do this, meaning like right now we need to go to sleep, or you need to wear the helmet right now. So those are boundaries. Boundaries are basically lines that we draw of like, here is where it stops, or here is where it's, right beyond this, I cannot let you go, or beyond this, I can't let you go in this way, etc.
Sure.
Yeah. So those are boundaries. Now, remind me where I was going with this. You paused me about.
So you were talking about in terms of like what questions we should ask ourselves.
So do you struggle to set boundaries when necessary? And I say when necessary because sometimes people are afraid they're permissive. I used to be very afraid that I was permissive because I would see all my neighbors, let's say, setting boundaries around what their children like. No, I bought this outfit, so you need to wear it. And like, if you didn't do that, you were considered permissive. Newsflash, that is not permissive. That is responsible.
Right.
Right. So sometimes because some of us were raised with such authoritarianism, sometimes we confuse what's a necessary boundary and what isn't. Authoritarian parents overstep their role and will set boundaries when it is not necessary. So they'll tell a child, you can't wear this, when really it's just a matter of the parent's fashion sense. Now, again, when it comes to parents' values, that's a different story. Okay. But we're talking about, let's say the parent just is like, I don't like that style, or it's mismatching and you're going to embarrass me. So that's already, we're stepping into territory where it may not be completely necessary. So so the question is not, do you struggle to set boundaries when you don't think it makes sense? If you don't think it makes sense, I'm so happy you're listening to yourself. I'm so happy you're questioning that, because just because your neighbor does it or because everybody around you saying, oh, you should do that, doesn't necessarily mean that you should. It has to make sense to you. But if it makes sense to you and you believe that it's necessary, but you still struggle to set those boundaries, I would probably guess that maybe you're permissive sometimes. Not all the time. Right. So that now, on the other hand, if you struggle with empathy, if you struggle with seeing your child's perspective, if you struggle to put yourself in their shoes and to understand, like, maybe they're having a hard time. If you take what their behaviors personally and react very strongly to them, then maybe you might struggle sometimes with being authoritarian. Which all of us do sometimes, by the way, if you notice, because everything you just said now, sometimes I struggle even to set a boundary that's necessary. And I also sometimes struggle with having empathy. So that's why I wanted to say, like, we all do all of these some of the time. It's more about how often do you do this? Do you do this most of the time? Are most of your interactions with your children lacking empathy, lacking understanding, lacking consideration for the child? Then maybe you know.
And you're saying it can't be like a combination of the two, meaning if a parent, let's say, lacks the empathy, but is also very permissive.
It could be.
Right? I mean, like, so you're saying it could have overlap.
Yeah, and actually, to be honest, most permissive parents eventually become authoritarian. It's actually a pattern. So imagine a parent like this a parent struggles to set boundaries. Okay. They believe it's necessary, but they really struggle because there could be so many reasons why they struggle. They feel like it's mean to their child, or they have a hard time with their child's emotions. They're worried that it will hurt their child, etc. They want their child to like them. Let's say any of those. So they struggle to set the boundary. So they don't. Okay. So let's say the child really needs to go to sleep, but they don't insist that the child goes to sleep. Let's say. Then the child doesn't, the parent becomes so resentful because the child is still up and the parent has no idea, right? So they get resentful and the resentment builds until finally the parent says, go to sleep and I don't care if you want anything right now, right? The parent is like, they're at their limit. And so they have no capacity to care for their child or their emotions in that moment. And then that's authoritarian. There's no support. And it's just like, I'm the boss and just listen to me right now. Most permissive parents will do that. And then a day later, because they feel so terrible that they did that, they go right back to being permissive. Right. So that's why really it's a combination. Really, we do a lot of these like together. But yeah, so of course it's possible that we do both. Yeah.
Got it. Wow. Very interesting. Any other things that a parent should do, I guess, to try to figure out what type of style they're in, or that basically
for me, that's like the best way to kind of be like, if I struggle with boundaries, it usually means that maybe I struggle with permissiveness. If I struggle with empathy or with understanding or consideration, then maybe I struggle with, now again, there's so many other parts to it and moving parts, but those are like the two that really, really stand out. It's, if you think about it, it's, I don't know. You know the spheros, like chesed and gvura? Sorry, boundaries is gvura, right? It's the boundaries. It's like the strength, right? And then the chesed is the empathy, the understanding. And so I believe that both are needed. And most of us lean more towards one than the other. So yeah, for a more chesed person, we probably maybe struggle with permissiveness. And where for a more gvura person, we might struggle a little bit with being authoritarian.
Very interesting. Yeah. Very, very interesting. Do you think that it's important for both spouses to have the same parenting style, or not necessarily?
Honestly, I think that idea, and I'm really actually planning on making a course on it because I think it's such a detrimental notion that is being promulgated, however you say that. Anyway, it really, because how can two people have the exact same style? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Why? Why
not? Because no two people are alike. I mean,
but if there's only 4 styles, then chances it's possible for them to have the same style. No,
you're saying in the broad, like you're talking.
You're saying
like in the nitty gritty, right? Because even though in a broad way we might both be authoritative, my husband and I still totally don't have the same style.
Right.
Okay. Now, right. Okay. So you're saying even in like in the grand scheme, like, okay. So here's the thing. Even in that sense, I really struggle with the idea where we say parents should have the same style, because let's say I say that. Okay. Now what happens? So now there are 2 parents who have one is permissive and one is authoritative. Okay. So now what do we do? So is the authoritative parent going to try to change the permissive parent? Is the permissive parent going to try to change the authoritative? Like, what's happening? What's going on?
Doesn't sound healthy.
No, exactly. So that to me is like, I don't understand what that means. I always think that when we say that, what ends up happening is that one parent ends up trying to change the other, or one parent just gives up on what they really stand for. Meaning some parents will even reach out to me and say, I really want to be authoritative or harmonious, right? I want to be what you talk about, respectful, but my spouse isn't. So like, can I be? And sometimes they don't give themselves the permission to, because, I need to be the same style as my spouse because she's authoritarian. Sure. And, or vice versa. I'm just saying female, male, it could be both ways. And it's just so sad to me. It's like, so a parent will give up what really they value and like what is in their integrity, what they really believe is best for their child, because my spouse doesn't parent that way. And so we have to be on the same page. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me. So then how do they, how does that work? So this is my belief. Okay. Because I believe that, and because we talk about, as people say, well, because it needs to be a united front, like it would be terrible for children to see that. So here's what I think is terrible for children to see. I think that, yes, if parents argue in front of one another about the style, let's say the father goes ahead and starts, punishing the child, and then the mother says, no, don't punish it. What are you doing? Right. And says that for the child, which, by the way, I have done that. And so if any of you are listening and you did that, like, don't worry, we all make mistakes. But I'm saying, obviously, that is not ideal for a child to witness a parent constantly fighting about which style should we parent this child with, or trying to control each other's style, really. So I don't think they have to see that both parents are parenting the exact same way. It's more that they support each other and don't undermine one another in front of them, at least, right? So there are things that my husband and I do not agree with. Like, he believes, let's say, something's really important. I don't. We don't see eye to eye on it. But I will support him in his, like, it's really important to him and he really believes. And so I will say, I respect that, and I will support you in doing that. And what that means is that I don't lie to my children. I don't pretend that this is something that's important to me too. I am honest with them. I'll say, this is really important to Tati, and so therefore I am supporting him in this. And they'll say, but you don't care about it. You don't care about this because they know me. You know what I care about. And I'll say, you're right. But Tati and I made the decision that we are going to support one another, and I support him in this. That's what children need.
That's a strong message.
Exactly. So they need a united front, that our relationship is more important. It comes first, and that we support one another regardless, even if we see it differently. I actually think it's beautiful for my children to see that. Like, that's an example for how to navigate relationships, Right. Yeah. So like that. So to me, that's my, and again, who am I? I'm just myself, but that's really from my own journey with my own parenting. This is the conclusion that my husband and I came to, that this is the way that both people can maintain their integrity, can parent in a way that aligns with their own values, while also really being a united front in the sense that they really support one another and have that, respect for one another, for the children, like, so that their relationship is the most important thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm curious. When I first asked you the question, your first reaction was, well, it's impossible because, like, me and my husband might both be even authoritative or authoritarian, whatever you want, but we still have different styles. What did you mean by that? What did you mean by that? The different styles with it, meaning, because that wasn't really within these categories that we're talking about. Right.
So even within a certain style, meaning my husband and I both agree with the authoritative model. Okay. We both, our values align with that. We have the same perspective. But when it comes down to, everyday moments, sometimes we might disagree about what is best for our children or how to navigate something, just because you have more or less the same style. Which, again, I just want to say I have so much compassion for parents who have a really different style, where, like, one is authoritarian and the other one is, authoritative. That's a huge difference. And it's very painful, I'm sure, for a parent to witness. Sure. Yeah, an authoritative parent to witness an authoritarian parent is very painful. It's like, why are you doing that to the children, And again, I'm not saying you shouldn't have conversations about that. I think you can have conversations about that with a therapist, or, I would really recommend that. Or if you don't want to, within yourselves, but not that you're fighting in front of the kids about how to do it. You understand? Anyway.
Right.
So I have a lot of compassion for that. But even within the same style, we all have different ways of navigating specific situations, or different beliefs about what we think is best for our children.
Sure.
Yeah.
And what is that? What is the, meaning if that doesn't fall under parenting styles, like, what is that exactly? What would you?
Yeah, I guess that's like the uniqueness of each human, at the end of the day, like, even though there are certain parenting styles that, like I said, are predictors for wonderful things like children who have emotional health and responsibility and contributing humans to society, etc. Even though there are certain styles that predict that, I totally lost my train of thought. What was I?
In terms of, I'll let you.
No. Remind me what I was saying. What was I talking about?
You're saying that even though that individuals, like, basically you're saying the personality of the individual.
Right. Oh, right. Exactly. So even though like certain predictors are like, okay, so then we might use that parenting style to parent our children, they're still within like that broad term of like, okay, let's give a child a high level of support and also boundaries. There's still the nuances of, is this boundary really necessary or is this boundary not?
Interesting.
Right? Oh, and then what I wanted to say is that it comes down to each individual's own sense, meaning like that's what I was trying to say. There's no like wrong or right. This is the thing. So many parents reach out to me and they'll say, is this the right thing to do? Is this the wrong thing? And parents, when they come to me and ask me what boundaries to set, I have a rule. I don't tell parents what's an important boundary or not, unless it's safety. Then it's like obvious. Yes, this is a very important. When it comes, most of it's very much in the gray area. I don't know if this is important or if this is necessary. That's for every parent has to decide themselves. And a lot of it comes down to our own way of seeing the world. And do you understand what I'm saying? It comes down to our own personality.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. Okay. So far we've covered more, I guess, like of the basics of parenting styles. To get into a slightly more practical, so what, I guess we've spoken a little bit about what they look like in practice, but is it possible for, as you said before, like they're not singular. You can change, they ebb and flow and whatever. Can someone actively go and change their parenting style? Is that possible for a parent to do?
Absolutely. With a lot of work.
What does that work look like?
Okay.
Meaning as like a parent coach, like how would you help someone?
I have to say that even myself, I mean, I really was a real mashup between permissive and authoritarian that was trying to be authoritative, but didn't know what in the world I was doing. So, I personally changed my parenting style. I definitely didn't parent the way I do now all the time. I used to threaten my children all the time. It was my favorite thing.
Right. I feel like you spoke, like you said, like in the last time we spoke about like the idea of how you were raised in such a different way. And you were like, I wasn't spoken to the way that I wanted to have been spoken to, or that would have been best for me.
Correct.
And therefore you like did the research.
I was trying to do it before I did the research, but I didn't know what I was doing. So I sort of just kept jumping between permissive and authoritarian, more or less. I changed my parenting style, and I worked with so many parents who have changed their style. What I mean by a lot of work is that it's every single day really persisting and doing it, this is a little bit more personal, but I have a sister she lived in my house while I was learning about all these things and I was incorporating it. So she really watched the journey unfold with me. And
she lived the course. She didn't just like take the course. She really like lived it.
Exactly. Like she really actively saw me shifting things. And she told me just a few days ago that she is wanting now to change certain things in her life and the way she does things. And so many times she feels like giving up. And she thinks like, oh, like I'm never going to get there. And then she said, I think of you. And I remember what you used to be like. And I remember that it was so like tiny, the changes that you made. They were barely noticeable, but over time you did it. Like you were able to really shift things. And I just thought it was so incredible. I was like, wow, I can't believe that was that's an inspiration for you. She's like, it is, because that's the only way change happens. And it's so easy to give up because you're like, oh, literally, like I'm doing this tiny thing. What is that in the big, in the grand scheme of things? But that's the only way change happens. Change only happens in tiny steps. But over time, you look back like 6 years and you're like, whoa, I'm a different parent.
Right. So like take us through that journey a little bit. I mean, like I guess get us through the lens of your sister's eyes.
Yeah.
You going from someone who was raised by authoritarian parents and was being an authoritarian parent and really wanted to shift to go towards being more authoritative. What are some of those steps that you went through?
Yeah. So first I want to say is that it's so much of it is consistently and constantly exposing yourself to new ideas. Meaning like some people say, oh, I'm going to take a course, like my course, let's say, and I'm going to change it. I don't believe taking a course one time has ever changed anyone's parenting. Because you have to realize that the authoritarian way of parenting is also a mindset. It's a lens through which you view your child's behavior, your role as a parent. There's a lot of thinking of like, my child can't get away with that, or my child needs to know I'm the boss, and a lot of like fear of the child, and I need to be the authority, and oh, my child's giving me a hard time. Like a lot of, without realizing, we have these like conditioning, right? Especially if we were raised by authoritarian parents, I had a lot of this conditioning in my brain without even realizing. Like I had just downloaded it, without my permission. So but that's what happens. And then so I just had these beliefs, and I would see my child's behavior through that lens. So much of it is really shifting the way we see it. So much of it is about a paradigm shift, about like, we don't see it the same way anymore. And so but changing beliefs, like ingrained conditioning, takes time.
Yeah, that's like so hard.
It takes a lot of exposure. The more and more you're exposed to somebody who says it differently or thinks differently around it, you're like, it slowly seeps in. That's how I believe that most of my parenting changed, because I read book after book after book and lecture after lecture. I kept really what's the word called, like entirely surrounding myself with this information. I followed.
You were totally consumed by it.
That's the word. Exactly. So a lot of it is that, because so much of it is really about the paradigm, about the way we see it. This is why I share posts every day. I really believe that.
I was going to say, someone who is really looking to do this just needs to read your posts every day and get into that mindset, because it's really like each of your posts are just a shift in the mindset. It's like, oh, wow, I didn't see it that way. I didn't see that's how my child is feeling, or that's how I'm affecting my child. Or,
exactly. That's what my goal is. I try to do with my posts. So parents who've never taken my course, or parents who have already, people tell me, even though they took my course, that they need to constantly remember this and see it this way. So a lot of it is about that. So it's taking like tiny, tiny, tiny actionable steps, but tiny. Like maybe you're the kind of parent who every single time your child reacts with emotion to a boundary that you set, you fly off the handle on them. Let's say you're like, stop making a big deal, stop crying, it's fine. Let's say you're that kind of parent. Maybe you're not, maybe you're permissive and you be like, oh, fine, you can have whatever you want. But whatever your challenge is, then a tiny step would maybe be like one time this whole week, not every day, because that's too much already. One time this whole week, one time when my child is upset about something, I will refrain from reacting. Start with that, let's say, right? So start with it. Then because going to empathy is like, that's way too many steps ahead, right? Having compassion for what your child is going through when you're feeling reactive, that's way too many steps ahead. Let's just help the parent just like slow down their reaction and be there for themselves. So like that, you take like one tiny step, and then you really every single day, and you don't give up when you like the whole week passes by and you haven't even done it once. Because guess what? All of us have been there. Meaning like I so many times had great intentions. It didn't end up doing anything. Like it didn't end up, what's the word? Whatever it is. It never ended up panning out that like
coming into fruition.
That the thing I wanted to do, I did. And so I sometimes wanted to give up. I was like, forget it. I keep having these good intentions. It doesn't, but the thing is that don't give up, because like that's how growth is. It's very not linear. Sure. It's like one step forward, two steps forward, one step back, and really if you stick with it and do very tiny, tiny things, like I said, and just keep exposing yourself. Because I think so much of it is about the mindset. Like I said, for me, I think that's where the biggest changes happened. We're in my own mind. We're in my own head, because you can tell a parent all day, like, oh, be there for your child's emotions or whatever. But if every single time their child has an emotion, they have thoughts like, my child is trying to manipulate me. They're trying, right? It's very hard to have compassion but if that mindset of like, my child's trying to manipulate me switches into, I'm feeling really overwhelmed and my child is just trying to get their needs met in the best way they know how. Whoa. Huge difference if I see it that way. You see, naturally, I have much more compassion and empathy. Yeah.
Right. I love also how you put it of when someone's in a state of being a reactive parent, it's almost impossible to expect them to be also at the same time empathic or compassionate. It's just like, those are two, like, they don't go. So I love how you like put that, because that's such like a, parents have to be self-aware. I am in a state right now where I'm totally reactive. And therefore, I'm not going to be able to be that. Or I'm totally the opposite. And therefore, maybe I'm not putting in the natural, boundaries that I should be.
Exactly.
So I love that.
Exactly. Yeah. I really think self-awareness is so important here, and a lot of self-compassion. Yeah. Like exactly. If I'm reactive, I can't be there for my child. I can't. Yeah.
Right,
All my energy is on
so
me.
I guess,
yeah.
right. I'm curious what instance warrants changing one's parenting style, meaning your child might not be loving it, but does that mean that necessarily that means that you have to change your parenting style or that your parenting style is wrong? Or maybe it's just like parenting that, this, I know it's like this might sound a little harsh, but like maybe the child needs to adjust to it. Like meaning at what point does a parent say, and I know that that's not, I know.
No, I love the
I'm saying
question.
it's purposely on purpose, at what point does a parent say, okay, this is not working. Like, let's pause game. Like, well, let's figure this out. At what point?
Yeah, I love that question. I really love that because I think sometimes parents do think that it's like, no, my child needs to shift now. Like I've done the thing.
Right.
This is how I parent. They need to change. Right. So for me, really, and everything I've read and from everything that I understand, to me, the way we measure it is with the strength of the relationship that we have with our child. I don't care whose fault it is, if it's a child who is constantly complaining and constantly upset, or if a child has a negative outlook or whatever it is. If the relationship that you have with your child is fraught with tension or a lot of disconnection, you don't feel close to the child doesn't feel close to you. Both ways, by the way, matter. I want to know how you feel towards your child too. That matters a lot because your child feels that whether it's ever spoken out loud. So if there's a lack of trust, a lack of emotional connection, then that to me is a signal something needs to shift here. Something we need to explore. Something needs to go on here. Something needs to change.
But not that meaning, because there is going to sometimes be that tension, right? Like meaning naturally.
You're talking about
you're saying a majority of the time, if that's just the general overall feeling.
Absolutely. I'm talking about overall. Of course. Are there moments when my child is so mad at me and so upset at me and there's friction because I just said that she can't do something that she wants to do? Absolutely. But that's very temporary. It's right now, this situation, and I'm there for her and I have empathy for her. And then she moves past it and then we're back to where we were. And also there's also moments where I might lash out or I might do something that wasn't okay. And which does kind of cause disconnection. I can repair that too. We're not talking about that.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm talking about overall, exactly. Overall, what's the sense that you get with your child and your child gets with you?
Sure. So, once you realize it's not working with the child, let's say you realize it's not just that it's not working with the child, but that your child really, I guess, either connects more or aligns more with your spouse's parenting style. So where do you go with that? Meaning, how do you maintain a positive or, an ideal relationship with your child, despite the fact that really your parenting style is not necessarily what they connect to? It's not necessarily meaning that there's necessarily an issue with your parenting style. It's just not what works best for that child. Meaning each child might need a different parenting style. So maybe, one child in the family loves your parenting style and the second child really loves your spouse's parenting style. How do we deal with that best?
Yeah. So I think that, okay, first of all, if you have a good relationship with that child, but they really love your spouse's parenting style more than yours, there's two ways you can approach this. Is first that's fine. Like they might prefer one style over the other, and you can just be okay with that and be like, well, our relationship is sturdy. Our relationship is okay. There's trust. There's connection. We're good.
You're saying it's possible to have that ideal relationship, even though the parenting style is just not really.
I don't think it's
matching up.
Well, I don't think it's as ideal as it could be. That's where my second point where I was going with is that what you can also do. No, it's totally fine. What you can also do is recognize, like, okay, if they like my husband's parenting style, my spouse, in my case, it would be a husband, right? A parenting style more, then what is it that my spouse does that my child really likes? And maybe I want to incorporate that into my style, right? And by the way, sometimes parents will say, like, I don't even agree with my spouse's style, but my child likes him more because, of course, they're let's say the spouse was permissive. Of course, they want to get what they want, everything they want. So, of course, they're going to go to my spouse. And the thing is like this, is that actually I know a lot of parents where one parent is permissive, the other one's authoritative, and the children don't prefer the permissive parent. They actually prefer the authoritative parent because they feel cared for. They feel like the parent is actually going to say, no, I won't let you do that. And they experience that the parent is very respectful. So they appreciate that. So I don't really believe that every child will go for sure for the permissive parent, unless, of course, the other parent, maybe the only time they receive understanding or whatever it is from the other parent. But having said that, my point is, even if the other parent is permissive, and that's why the children are gravitating towards that parent's style, then there's something there for you to learn from. That's how I see it. If my children prefer my husband's style with certain things, then I ask myself, like, what is it about that he's doing that they really prefer more? And I really do try to incorporate that because, like I said, even though my relationship might be working with them, I would want it to be even more ideal. I'm always looking to grow my relationship with them. So I would want to incorporate that.
Sure. And there's no concern here that children are, not as developed and are immature and therefore don't necessarily know, meaning they might think they know what's best for them. Right? Like sometimes a child will think that I really want candy and that I think that's what's great for me. I really want to eat a lot of that. But, at the end of the day, that's, we as parents know we have to set those healthy boundaries. So is there any sense here that, a child might be more appreciative of, let's say, either the permissive or even the one that's setting down those boundaries, but they don't really yet know really what's really best. And therefore, as parents, either we shouldn't necessarily, so quickly change or maybe we should. I mean, that's what I'm asking. How is it that it's being driven by the child if a child is not even not necessarily at that stage to be able to make such big decisions?
That's a really good question. So here's where I make the differentiation. Okay. Is if, let's say, a child loves a parent who constantly gives them candy, right? They're always like, sure, you can have it, right? And you're like, the child, obviously they like that better because they want candy, not because they don't understand that having too much candy is not good for their teeth, for their health, whatever it is, right? But the thing is that what I actually put it like this. I say children know themselves best. They're the only people who can tell you what they're experiencing. We don't know their experience better than they do. Okay. So your children know themselves best. They know what they feel. They know what's in their body. They know themselves best. We know the world best. We know the implications of things, the consequences of things. We understand how things can manifest and what can happen. We understand that much better than our children because we have more, of course, when they're younger, especially because we understand much more about the world because we've been here longer and we've learned the rules of the game, right? So we understand the world better. I like to say, and our children understand themselves better. So when my child, let's say, likes a parent better because the parent says, oh, sure, you can have as much candy as you want, I'm not going to take that to mean that, like, oh, my child understands the world, and so I have to follow whatever it is that they're saying. But what I am tuning into is my child knows themselves best. So there's something about that my child really, really likes. Now, is it the fact that that just like they from that parent they receive what they enjoy, or is it that they feel more considered by that parent, or is it that they feel like the parent gives them more choice or more freedom, right? And then I ask myself, is there a way to incorporate those things into my parenting? Not that I'm just going to be, oh yeah, you can also have candy whenever you want. Do you understand what I'm saying? Well, to put it this way, it's really
right. You're saying it's not about the candy; it's about what's really happening on the inner side of the child that's really driving this. So, like, if for them it's the freedom. So then where are ways that I can give them the freedom that doesn't necessarily involve candy, but give them freedom? Is that right? Am I understanding?
Exactly. The way I would say it best is that what needs of my child is it meeting? Though they want the candy, I'm not looking for wants. What needs of my child is my spouse meeting that I maybe am not meeting as well as my spouse's. Now, it could be that it's not the case, but I would ask myself if that's maybe the case.
Got it. And you would say that in general, there is some sort of need that's deeper, even if we're dealing with children who are really young, who are like, I just want candy. But you're saying there's something more to it usually.
So my personal belief is that every single behavior is driven by a need. This is, I didn't make this up. It's from Dr. Marshall Rosenberg is the one he didn't actually come up with it, but he's the one who really, made it very well known. So every single behavior, adult, child alike, is driven by a need. Now, when we say, so it's really the driving force behind everything we do. But needs can be anything. It needs autonomy, choice, freedom, connection, attention, comfort, stimulation. So candy could be the need for just stimulation. Candy, they call it play food because it's actually play. Right? So it's stimulating. It's exciting. There's also, there's so many needs that it could be meeting. So, but the question is if it's meeting a need that we're not meeting as well as that parent is, we can ask ourselves that. So yes, I do believe even behind the child's need for a want for candy there is a need driving it. There could be a few needs driving it.
Right.
Got it.
I'm curious, something that we didn't really touch on is how does this, this idea of parenting styles interact with different ages? Meaning, are there specific ages that one type of parenting style is best for or makes more sense for versus, meaning teens, want their autonomy a little more. Younger children need a little more guidance. So does the parenting style maybe shift at a certain point, or is that not a thing?
Yeah. So I believe that if you start out as an authoritarian parent, then yes, many times they talk about teenagers and they say, oh, well, your teenagers, just wait for it. Wait for when teens come. You're going to have to shift everything around or, because until then it's like, I was the boss, I had a say. And then the teenager wakes up and says, well, I'm a person too. And so I also have a say. Right. But with authoritative, or I don't really like to call it that, but harmonious parents or whatever you want to call it. We, even though the child has been very young and hasn't really taken up, space or really asserted their autonomy in a way that a teenager would, we still really, really respect their autonomy and really look to give them room. So the way I would say is that a child has a need for autonomy all throughout their life, from when they're tiny until it doesn't change. However, and I like the way you said it, they need more guidance. I would say this is how I see it. Our job is to create boundaries, and our children's job is to choose within those boundaries. We always give our children choices within boundaries. Yeah. So these are my boundaries. This is what and then within that, you can choose how you want to do it, or I can help you figure out your choice. And so
why is that important?
Because it's always really important to give children autonomy and choice. It's a need. Autonomy.
You're saying just to give them to empower them.
Yeah. Or to just meet their need as a human being. It's first of all, it's not healthy for children, but it's also a really horrible feeling not to have autonomy or choice. Children really, yeah. Sure. Like I said, it can mutate in two different ways if a child's not given choice or freedom from a young age. Either they're going to silence their own voice and their own needs or they're going to rebel and they're going to be like the defiant child who everybody is mad at all the time. That's usually what happens when we don't give them autonomy. So we really want to give them from a very young age. The only thing that shifts as they get older is that our boundaries are much more, we might not have certain boundaries anymore, or sure. Not that we don't really have those boundaries, is that we trust that our child can set those for themselves.
Got it. Amazing. Do you have any final message on this topic of parenting styles?
Yeah. Oh my.
I know there's a lot you could say here.
Well, here's what I'm thinking is that I found that when I used to come across parenting these styles, sometimes when I was starting out learning about parenting, I used to feel a lot of guilt or shame when I used to see myself in a certain style, oh my gosh, I'm a permissive parent. Oh my goodness, I'm an authoritarian parent because it says this terrible things about them. And, and I was I was flooded with shame. And so I'm really wanting to send a message to any parent listening to this. And when I shared either of those styles, or if I shared what those look like or what the outcomes are, right, which is again, not a guarantee, it's just a predictor, that I really want you not to go down this whole path of shame and guilt. We all do all of them, like I said. And even if we do it most of the time and that's our style, you can always shift things. And there's so much hope and there's so much room for change. I've worked with parents of teenagers, because sometimes people think, oh, it's too late. It is your relationship with your child. It's never too late for your relationship. You can always work on it. You can always focus on it. And and you haven't it's not too late and you're okay. And I want you to have a lot of compassion for yourself because you did the best you could with whatever you knew. And you can always shift things. You can always change things.
Amazing. Wow. Thank you so much. This was super informative, super practical. We had it all. We had the basics, we had the practical, we had some intervention. This is amazing. As always, Blimie, thank you so much. Really appreciate the time and giving us just, the ability to pick your brain, which is amazing on parenting. And thank you. Thank you
so much. I really appreciated the questions and I appreciated the opportunity to share this with everyone. So thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Jews Next Door. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. I'd love to hear your takeaways. Reach out to us. Reach out to me at yair@genoff.org, hi@genoff.org. You can check us out on the website. You could leave a question there. We'd love to be in touch. Please be in touch. Check us out on Instagram at Parenting the Jews Next Door. Hit me up on Twitter at yair Menschel. And we're on TikTok now too. We have some great content, a lot of really great insights into parenting, tips, parenting pointers, reaction videos, and quotes. We have a lot going on. We have a lot of articles. You want to check it out. Check it out at genoff.org. You won't be sorry you did. And I look forward to hearing from you. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the podcast, make sure you subscribe and share it with your family and friends. Looking forward to another great episode next week.